Hey YouTube, it's KJ. I've been missing in action for 9 months. Sorry about that. I'm not the best at staying committed to things. That sounds really bad, but I will admit it. Um, but a lot of things have taken place in my life since the last video I did. So I guess I'm gonna recap everything. Well, not everything, but like a summary of all the crap that has taken place since then. Um, So about a month or less after my last video, my son was in the hospital twice in 1 week because we couldn't figure out why he was throwing everything up. Zeus, can you stop with the computer, dude? My cat is kicking my computer, so if it's shaking, that's why. Um, so he was hospitalized twice in 1 week for like really bad dehydration. For about 2 months, he was like throwing up periodically, like maybe once or twice a day, but he had always had like reflux issues and allergy issues, so that was not really abnormal. I mean, it kind of was because like it stopped after 6 months, and by that point in time, he was about 12 months, so uh, it was a little bit abnormal, but his doctors really weren't concerned until it got to the point where like he wasn't keeping down fluids, he wasn't keeping down solids, and he got to the point where he was actually vomiting blood because he had been throwing up so frequently that he irritated his esophagus. So that happened, and that was a pretty stressful situation. So at that point in time, even when I wanted to make a video, I was in school, so I was trying to keep my grade point average up while still handling everything with him. Um, a couple months after, in September, my best friend was killed by a drunk driver, and that's something that I'm still trying to cope with. It's been very, very difficult for me because we had been best friends for a very long time. She was actually my first like real girlfriend back when I was like 13, 14, something like that. And around probably 15 or 16, we became best friends. And like she was around for my son's birthday parties, like everything. Like, anyways, this is gonna be a long topic anyway, so I'm not gonna go into that. But yeah, so that happened. My wife and I also separated a month after my best friend's death. And that's been interesting, trying to, I guess, just get the hang of being a single mom and do things on my own. She's still involved with our son for the most part, like she video chats him every day, stuff like that, but she lives pretty far, so it's kind of difficult. There's not much help. So it's been pretty hectic, and I haven't really had the time to sit down and make a video because when I'm not handling him, I have to do everything that has to be done around the house, and I only get about the hour and a half period of time that he takes a nap, and sometimes it's not even that to do things. I think that's about like the main things that have taken place. But I decided to come back to YouTube because I've been home for a while now and I'm losing my mind because obviously we've all been in this pandemic and we've been quarantined. But the point of this video is actually to talk about the fact that I did have COVID-19 and basically just to explain my experience with that because everybody has different experiences. So here goes. So, in the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, it had been like talked about slightly, but like I'm not the type to watch the news. It's just really depressing, so I kind of stay away from it. But I did, I turned on alerts for like the news website, so like it lets me know like huge topics or whatever. So at that point in time, coronavirus really wasn't like a huge topic. It was coming out like slowly, I guess, before it got really bad. Um, my ex-wife and I went on a trip, and it wasn't like a small trip to like Orlando. We live in Palm Beach County, so that was like a 3-hour trip, and that was something we did all the time. So our trip, we went from Palm Beach to Orlando, and from Orlando to where I think it was Georgia, Savannah, Georgia. But we stopped in Ocala as well on the way to visit with a friend. And then from Ocala, we ended up stopping somewhere in Georgia. I don't really remember the town, but we stopped for like coffee, and some food. And then by the time we got to Savannah, it was really late at night. But so once we got to Savannah, we didn't go anywhere until the next day when I had to stop at the gas station and get like food on the road. And from Savannah, we went to South Carolina. Um, we were in South Carolina for, I don't remember really how many days. I think it was like maybe 3 days. But while we were there, we really didn't go out. Like we went out to eat with my friend's mom on the first day we were there, and it was to like a Chinese restaurant buffet type thing. So we did that, and after that, we kind of just stayed. I went to the store once, and we went to Starbucks once, but like we stayed there. So in Orlando, we had taken our son to a trampoline park because, like I said, the virus really wasn't that bad at that point. It was just like a something that came across in the news as like no big deal, kind of like this may be coming, but it's starting to get to the point where we're watching it a little closer because our cases are going up. So it started to get more serious when we were leaving Orlando, but this trip was already planned. We already had a hotel booked in Georgia, and I mean, there was no really going back from that because at that point, that was before hotels started giving refunds and stuff for fear of the coronavirus. So at that point, like, we really had no option. It was either be out the money or we were going to have to just continue the trip. And we were already, I think, like 6 hours from Georgia. So, like, it didn't make sense to cancel the trip after we had already been out. Um, And even then, it really wasn't a point where they were like, oh, shelter in place. And it didn't get as bad at that point. Um, so it didn't start to really get bad until we got to South Carolina. And at that point was when they started closing schools, they started closing restaurants. So when we came home from South Carolina, we stopped in Jacksonville because I did not want to make the trip all the way from South Carolina to Palm Beach County because that would have been a good, probably like 10-hour trip, something like that. So I didn't want to make that trip. So we stopped in Jacksonville, which was a 5-hour drive from South Carolina. Um, we went out to eat when we were in Jacksonville because at that point, things were still open for the most part. Like they were closing early, but it was not, again, it was not a shelter in place type of deal at that point. It was getting to the point where like they were discussing a shelter in place, but there was no make sure you stay home or you're going to die type of thing. It was more so like they were starting to limit like get-togethers, and they had by that point in time said like school's out till at least April. So it was getting more serious, but at that point it wasn't like, like I said, you're gonna die if you're out. Um, so coming home, we had went straight from Jacksonville home, and by the time we left Jacksonville, things were closing. So there was like no bathrooms open, nothing was open on the inside. It was to the point where like while we were in Jacksonville, we basically went into quarantine. So trying to find food and stuff from the stores before we got home because my son had food allergies, so it was just like a bunch of running around in Jacksonville. I ended up having to buy a cooler, go to several stores to try to find stuff for him. I couldn't find hand sanitizer anywhere, so we had like a little thing of hand sanitizer that lasted us from the day we left on the trip to when we came back. So we were without sanitizer for a good couple of days. And no bathrooms were open, like I said, to clean my hands. So it was like when we were out and about, I was using like bottled water and dish soap to wash my hands in the parking lot because at that point we literally had nothing to clean our hands and try to prevent from getting this virus. So finally when we got home, I went, I got a little bit more serious about it because by that point in time we were quarantined. Things were closed on the inside. So I got a little bit more serious about it because things got a little more serious. So after that, I really didn't go out. And that was 14 days. 14 days after leaving Jacksonville was when I started showing my first signs of COVID. Um, so I guess technically my symptoms started like in Jacksonville. Like I noticed the last day before we came home when I was in Jacksonville that I started to have a sore throat. But I have asthma and I have seasonal allergies. So like that really didn't strike me as anything abnormal. I had a little bit of a cough. I had like a sore throat, but I've had basically a chronic sore throat for about a year now. Like it just comes and goes. It lasts a couple of days, goes away. Um, so I kind of just chalked it up to that. It's no big deal. Like I'm fine. And then 14 days later, well, I guess I should say like maybe 10 days later, my son, he got really sick. So he got to the point where he was showing signs of the virus, but his test actually came back negative. Now, I got sick from my son. I'm pretty sure because I got sick 3-4 days after he started getting sick. So he got the fever. He got like the boogery nose, the cough, the fatigue. Like he pretty much got just really sick. One morning he had woken up and he was so freaked out because he was coughing so hard and he was having trouble breathing that he actually started like hyperventilating and had a panic attack where his heart started racing. And that's the day that I took him to the doctor to get him some antibiotics. So, this was before COVID testing was readily available. This was a couple, like probably maybe a week before, not even. It became available about, I'd say like 5 days later. So within that time frame, I ended up getting sick as well. So on March 30th, my first telltale sign of the virus was I had a fever of 100.7. And after that, like, I just started getting all of the signs of this virus. And I kept chalking it up, oh, it's just a flu, it's just some type of like cold, it's fine, I don't have this. So, once I got the fever of 100.7, my fever just progressively continued to go up. It got up to about 102.5, I think, and I had some trouble breaking it. Like, it would take like 4 hours for my body to break a fever. My fatigue was so bad to the point where I literally could not keep my eyes open. And I started having severe pain in my legs to the point where, like, it hurt to walk, it hurt to lay down, it hurt to do anything. My legs hurt so bad. I would say that was one of my worst symptoms of having this virus was my pain in my legs. Um, After the fever went away was when my respiratory symptoms started. So my fever lasted a good week. And that basically was just treated with not really rest because I'm a mom. So like I got rest once in a while, like when my parents were able to watch my son. But normally, like I really didn't get much rest because of the fact that I do have to still do things for my son. I still had to get up and cook. I still had to get up and clean. I still had to make sure he was good. I had to, do normal mom duties. So there was really no rest. And since he was sick, he wasn't sleeping well. He was waking up like 3-4 times a night. He was waking up super early in the morning. So there was really no rest, which probably is why I had the virus for such a long time. I had it for probably a good month. But basically, I was just treating my fever in the beginning with Tylenol and ibuprofen because at that point in time, nobody knew whether you were supposed to take it, not supposed to take it. But like, I had a severe migraine like the whole time I was sick. So a good month, I had a headache every day. But it started as a migraine for about a week straight, and it was the worst headache I've ever faced in my life. It was to the point where like it played into not being able to keep my eyes open. Um, And it just felt like my whole head was just pounding. Sensitivity to light, everything that comes with a migraine, but it was like 10 times worse. Um, at that point in time, my cough really was not that bad. Like, I had a cough, but it hadn't gotten bad at that point. Uh, After my symptoms, like the earlier symptoms, the leg pain and all of that started to subside, was when the respiratory symptoms kicked in, and that was scary nonetheless. I have asthma, so my breathing is not always the best anyways, which I'm sure you guys can see in this video. When the respiratory symptoms kicked in, that's when the cough got really bad. I was having like coughing fits for a good 15, 20 minutes nonstop, to the point where by day 3, my coughing was so bad that I had pain in my ribs. Like, every time I coughed, it felt like somebody was squeezing my rib cages. Um, Anytime I tried to do anything, like, I'm talking walk to the other side of the room, I would get out of breath and start coughing. When I would try to take my inhaler for asthma, I would not be able to get it into my lungs, and it would cause me to start coughing. So when all of this was happening, my oxygen didn't really get to a point where, like, it was detrimental, but, like, it was falling to, like, the 92s, the 91 area. So when that happened, I basically would just try my inhaler, and that wasn't working. I didn't have any albuterol to use for like a breathing treatment. So I pretty much just struggled with it. Like, I would just have these coughing fits and have these like drops in my oxygen levels, and I literally thought, like, I felt like I was gonna die. Um, my regular resting oxygen level, like if I was just sitting in the chair or like laying down, was between 94 and 96%. Um, so there wasn't really much I could do for that except for wait it out. Like, cough drops didn't work for me. Tea with honey didn't work for me. Hot water didn't work for me. None of that stuff ever worked for me. It was just a kind of like a sit and wait type of thing. And that lasted probably, I'd say, about a week. I had one day where it was like really bad, and it was actually towards the end of the respiratory symptoms when they got really bad, and my oxygen was falling way worse, and my coughing got way worse, and that's when my rib cages actually started hurting. And that night, I really, really thought I was gonna die. I ended up having to sleep straight up in a recliner chair, not reclined whatsoever. Like, I literally sat straight up that night and fell asleep that way. And I had called my mom to the bathroom because I had just gotten out of the shower and I was crying, and I told her, like, I cannot breathe. I don't know what to do. So she brought me like Mucinex, and she brought me Dayquil, and she brought me Vicks, and the works. And I still had to sleep sitting straight up in the chair with checking my oxygen levels with a pulse ox every couple of minutes. By that point in time, like, my resting oxygen level that night was about a 92. And that night, honestly, I just sat up and I cried and I prayed. I prayed to God that I would not die from that. You know, I literally sat there and I begged God, like, please don't take me out of the world at 24. My son needs me. Oh God, it's emotional. And I prayed for my parents because I knew at that point I had the virus, and I knew at that point, being that both of my parents are immunocompromised, that there was a chance that they could get it as well. So I just sat up that night and I just prayed. I prayed for my life. I prayed for my parents' lives. I prayed for my son. And it was rough. A lot of people think, it's not a big deal until it affects them. And I wouldn't say that I believed that in the beginning, but like, I didn't think it was as big of a deal until I had it. And once I had it, I understand what the news is saying. It's not a joke. It's not a lie. It's not a scaring tactic. Like, this this virus has taken so many people out of this world, and we see it as like just a handful, but when you're personally affected by it, like, I understand how people are dying from this because I literally thought that I was going to die. And I was literally like, I was blessed to make it through. And there's people who didn't. Um, so I don't even know. Like, the point of the video is not really to preach to anybody how serious this virus is or anything like that. It's not to tell everybody, like, take it seriously, because you either are or you're not. But it's just really to explain, like, the symptoms that I faced, the things that I went through with this virus, my personal experience in it. And I'm more than happy to listen to people's stories and the people who have had it, the people who have had family members with it. Like, I just wanted to come on here and talk about it because it's so prevalent in society right now, because we're just now getting out of quarantine. And um, I just figured that this was the best video to come back to YouTube with. And it's hard to talk about because it's not something that's like in the past. It's something that really recently happened to me. This happened back at the end of March into like April area. So it's pretty recent. I guess just like, oh, there was one symptom I forgot to say. The loss of taste literally was like the worst. I didn't eat much because you literally can't taste your food, and it's like disgusting because you can tell that you're eating, but like you can't taste anything. And that is one of the main symptoms of the virus, and it's a really weird symptom to have, but it is definitely a symptom, and it's one of them that I also faced. The leg pain was also something that I saw they had started to say was more of a common type of symptom with this virus, and I did go through that as well. Um, but that is my story of COVID-19. That is basically, I guess, what possibly could have led to me getting it was traveling, but most of my traveling was done like way before the 14-day quarantine period, so I'm not really sure how I got it. I don't really know how I got it. I couldn't say. But basically now I just stay inside as much as possible, even though things are opening back up, because I'm afraid that I will spread it to somebody. Even though I'm symptom free, it scares me. I don't want to be the reason that anybody gets this virus, because it's something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But if anybody wants to come on here and share their story with COVID, or like their fears, or has any questions, I'm more than willing to answer. I'm more than willing to listen to your story. But that's mine. So have a nice day.